Ito ang tinig mula sa silangan.
Thank you very much, Madam President, distinguished guests, my friends. It certainly is gratifying that in the course of my present visit to the United States, I should once again be accorded the opportunity to meet with the people who understand me or misunderstand me most. I'd like to thank all of you. I remember that our relationship, the relationship between the two countries can be opened up at one of 2 points by the historian or the curious investigator into world events. One, the military, which was Admiral or then Commodore Dewey, sinking the Spanish fleet under Montojo on May 1st, 1898 in Manila Bay, and with the help of the Filipino revolutionaries under General or President Emilio Aguinaldo, who then proclaimed the first Philippine Republic. Incidentally, President Emilio Aguinaldo was the grandfather of Prime Minister Cesar Virata, who is here. My grandfather only commanded the revolutionary forces. We have changed places since then. Either that point of entry is chosen or the more sedate commercial one 100 years back. 1796, the brig Astrea, sailing out of Salem, Massachusetts, towards Lisbon, and then to Manila, selling her wares there for 5 months, carrying that amateur and self-taught mathematician and navigator, Nathaniel Blow-Ditz, whom you must have heard, who later, in 1806, authored The Practical American Navigator, for he had discovered the simple way of determining longitude through the long voyage across the Pacific. The American government bought the rights after 2 editions, and it has become standard text for all those who study salesmanship from Kings Point to Annapolis. Either way, it has been dramatic and historic, and it was always to be so. There was always extreme on both sides, enmity, if not enmity, extreme friendship, a relationship of love, hate, and this is my fate and destiny. I thank you all for this privilege and this honor. It may be said that an official journal like mine ought always to visit with this press association, for, as someone once observed correctly, the American press is, of course, the 4th branch of government in this country. And then also it is well to remember that the so-called solicitude with which Americans regard developments in the Philippines is perhaps nowhere more pronounced than in the devoted reportage by the American press on our country. This keen of the American interest of the American press notwithstanding, there is, I fear, some confusion in this country of what is happening in the Philippines today. It has been one of the shocks I encountered while preparing for my present journey, and also upon arrival here in Washington, to read in one of your outstanding papers a statement to the effect that the Philippines is still under military rule, which it is not. and that there is no civil government. Such misstatements, whether intended or otherwise, conveniently merge with more accurate reporting about the true situation in the country, resulting in much confusion and misimpressions about our country, require clarification. So perhaps I should begin by stating first a few basic facts about our country without too much embroidery. The Philippines is a Republican state with a duly elected government at national and community level. We have a national constitution duly drafted by a constitutional convention, elected and convened in 1970, and duly ratified by our people in 1973. Under that constitution, ours is a modified form of presidential government with a National Assembly constituted by assemblymen elected by regions in 1978, and a president directly elected by the people in 1981. Legislative power is vested in that National Assembly, while the executive power is vested in the president. And the party in power, the party that won the most number of members in this National Assembly, choose the leader of the legislature, and the leader is the Prime Minister, and is no other than Prime Minister Cesar Virata. We have an independent judiciary which is under the full supervision of a Supreme Court. While it is claimed that human rights are not protected by the courts, or that civil rights are not duly enhanced by the Constitution, because there is no way of seeking, say, the remedy of a writ of habeas corpus. The truth of the matter is anyone can petition for a writ of habeas corpus in the Philippines. In fact, all those who have been apprehended as having brought in hundreds and hundreds of firearms bought from the PLO and other sources, and who have bragged openly in the television that when they are caught that they were the leaders of these rebel groups, and who later changed their tone on the advice of their lawyers, went to the Supreme Court and were able to obtain an order from the Supreme Court for the Philippine government to bring the bodies of these people to before the Supreme Court, which we did. There is not a single man who has filed a petition for a writ of habeas corpus who has not been able to compel the government to bring the body of all those petitioners to the Supreme Court. In fact, the Supreme Court ordered an investigation on the allegations of torture, and the results were negative. The doctors testified that they examined all of these persons, all these petitioners, during the period of confinement, and they never complained about any mistreatment or torture. And some indiscreet remark indicated that this was merely said on the advice of the lawyer as a preparation for defense in the criminal trial. Now let's review the overall measures. All measures that have been issued by the President were issued at his instance alone? No. They are issued after a meeting of what is known as the Party Caucus. You who have studied constitutional law know that in a modified parliamentary or presidential form of government, the President actually doesn't make the decisions. He may lead the party, and therefore in the caucus he may exert influence in the caucus, but the caucus decides what is going to happen, what is the policy to be adopted. In fact, our Constitution institutionalizes this procedure and states that the program and policy of government shall be adopted by the cabinet, submitted to the President for approval, but shall be responsible to the members of the National Assembly or the Batasang Pambansa, and for which the Prime Minister must stand. If he is rejected, then he must quit, he must resign, and a new prime minister must be appointed. Now, all cases are appealable to the Supreme Court, including cases of security against the state. We have a system of local government and administration throughout the country. In all, there are 73 provinces, 60 cities, 1,502 municipalities, 42,000 barangays, in each of which there are regular elections. Barangays are the villages. We just had elections this year. The election for president occurred in 1981. Under the Constitution, the people have a right of recall. They can recall anyone who has been elected by 1/5 of all the voters who voted in the last elections. A vote of 1/5 will suffice to call a new election for any given post. Our Constitution likewise provides for a Bill of Rights which guarantees protection of the political and civil rights of all individuals regardless of color or creed. Incidentally, that statement allegedly made by Cardinal Sin has been denied by Cardinal Sin. I was surprised that you haven't heard about it. This just goes to prove that there is some time lag when you move towards the West. Cardinal Sin, when he arrived in the Philippines, appeared before some of our friends and said, "Look, there is no quarrel between the church and state. And the church and state are separate. I have no intention of intervening in political affairs. I have not stated that the president should resign. That's his business. That's the business of the people. He was elected by the people, and I'm not about to say anything about this. That's why I'm surprised that here you make much of it. But I suppose that's part of news. It's good copy. Can you imagine asking the president to resign? That's by constitutional mandate. Social justice is a matter of national policy and a priority objective of government. And this is why one of the first reforms was land reform. You know, when I proclaimed martial law, I didn't proclaim martial law alone. It is made to appear as if I just signed the decree and said, I impose martial law on each and every one of you. No. I asked the legislature to please pass a law proclaiming martial law because there was anarchy in the country. Now, let me say this. The opposition was strong, and they were members of the Security Council, and somehow they adopted a resolution which required that there be a unanimous vote for the armed forces to be able to move. And therefore, the armed forces was immobilized. At the same time, I asked the opposition party to come and join me in a coalition government. I offered one half of the cabinet. And of course, they laughed at me and said, why should we join you? We're going to take over the government. By the time you are through with the exercise, you're dead, politically and otherwise. And they refused to join me. I asked the advice of the judiciary. I asked the Supreme Court justices, the Court of Appeals justices, and the members of the private sector. And all of them told me there's only one man who can proclaim martial law, and that is the president. And you are it. You are the only one who can proclaim martial law. This is why I must carry this particular mark in our history. I could not have transferred it to the legislature. Why? Because the legislature did not have the power. What does the Constitution provide? The President shall be the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, and he may order the armed forces out to quell any disorder, riot, rebellion, invasion, insurrection, and in case of invasion, insurrection, rebellion, or imminent danger thereof, when the public safety requires it, he may suspend the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus or proclaim martial law throughout the Philippines or any part thereof. What does that provision provide? It provides that only the president can proclaim martial law. I repeat, that is why I had to assume responsibility. And I am not one for shirking duty. The people said there was necessity for proclaiming martial law. And the people said, you are the only official who can proclaim martial law. So I proclaimed martial law. And I sincerely believed that it was necessary to proclaim martial law to install order and stability because there was complete anarchy throughout the country at the time. Now, therefore, at that particular period, what was the status of our government? Our government was immobilized, impotent. The armed forces could not move out. The industry was not at all in any way moving. There was no income coming into government. Everybody was running away. They burned the U.S. Partly burned the U.S. embassy, tried to burn it anyway. They tried to kidnap the American ambassador. American ambassador was Bayrou, Ambassador Bayrou. And they tried to kidnap our foreign minister, Romulo, whom you just saw today. And I told him, you better disappear because I will not ransom you. But whatever it is, they burned the Manila International Airport, they bombed the Supreme Court, they bombed the Constitutional Convention, they bombed the City Hall, they burned part of Malacañang Palace, they attempted to kidnap my children, they attempted to kill the president 8 times. There was, of course, an attempted assassination against the First Lady. You all know about that. And this required that I immediately act on it, and so I did. Now, we established land reform. We were fighting a group known as the Hukbalahap, Hukbong Nagpapalaya ng Bayan. It was socialist inclined. It was leftist, but they were friends of mine because we had fought in the Second World War together. And so I approached them and I said, look, I'm going to establish land reform. If you're fighting for land reform against the feudalistic agrarian system, then you must join me. And they did. I want to introduce to you the leader of that rebellion, who is now present and is a part of the government, Mr. Luis Taro. He is a member of the National Assembly. The one reason why he ran to the hills, according to him, was he was elected as a member of the old legislature and he was not recognized as such. He and the others. Now I want to introduce to you another leader of the Free Farmers Federation, which is also composed of farmers who wanted reform, but who are fighting for reform, but who are now joining in the effort to establish political stability and economic prosperity throughout the country, and who was Dean of the College of Law of the University of Ateneo, but abandoned his deanship in order that he may join in the effort to attain the noble mission of this new society. I refer to National Assemblyman Jerry Montemayor, President of the Federation of Free Farmers of the Philippines. I would like to introduce also to you a young man who was very active against the government in 1972 and who paraded around the streets raising the flag of the Communist Party and organized the Kabataan Makabayan, which is the red organization of the youth. And this man is Nilo Tayag. Is he here? Anyway, he is somewhere around here. But they have all joined, all these activists, to prove to you that all these stories about our being oppressive against our enemies and our friends, they've all joined the government to help reform and drive out all the corrupt people in the government. We have an ombudsman. We are the only country with an ombudsman. You know what an ombudsman is? He's the officer who watches over the corrupt officials of government, and this man has charged more than 1,000 officers and employees, and sent most of them to jail. Is Justice Pamaran here? He must be somewhere around. Where's Justice Pamaran? There he is. There's the ombudsman. And we have not deprived anybody of private property. On the contrary, while we are a free enterprise society, we have an egalitarian base. We recognize private property, encourage private initiative. And our Constitution explicitly recognizes the importance of developing the national economy and protecting the patrimony of the nation. In line with this, a National Economic and Development Authority has been created for the purpose of planning and coordinating economic development plans. I chair that Economic Development Commissioner. Now, I did not come all the way here to recite these basic facts to you, but it is best that we wrote this at once they form an important background of understanding the developments in my country. Relations between the United States and the Philippines now span, I'd say 84 years if you mark the Battle of Manila Bay, 184 years perhaps if you mark the brig Salem, from Salem, which when it returned to Salem brought back hides, indigo, lumber, pepper, and paid 24,000 in tariff duties. Many things don't change, not even tariff duties. Anyway, the trade between our countries is covered by a trade agreement. The military and security matters are covered by 3 agreements. Those agreements are, and I will now ask our friends in my staff to distribute these agreements to you, or as many as can receive them. These agreements are the Mutual Defense Pact, the Military Assistance Agreement, and the Military Facilities Agreement, which is due for review this coming year. President Reagan and I have agreed with the members of our cabinet that the review will start in April, probably we'll finish it by August. Through it all, our relationships develop in a way unique to nations so disparate in size and circumstances and so distant from each other. The direction which American colonization took in the Philippines in the political, economic, and military cultural spheres were such that for us, relations with the United States would remain crucial for a while. It is said that language is the greatest conveyor of culture. If that be so, if that wise man who said that is right, then your language has certainly conveyed to my country your culture. And this is why the relationship between our countries is something undefined. Our interests may have diverged in the period after our recovery of national independence in 1946, but this relationship has endured. And the question that is often asked is, does the Republic of the Philippines differ from the American Republic? Yes and no. It doesn't differ in the sense that it is democratic, but it differs in the sense that we have a prime minister, and in the sense that we try and make the legislature and the president or the executive work together. We cannot afford any stalemates. We cannot afford any delays. It is a modified presidential form of government, while yours is a complete and pure presidential form of government. Why did we change this? Because we cannot afford stalemates and deadlocks. Yours is a strong economy and a military power. Ours is a weak country. We cannot afford to delay and postpone decisions pending the debates between Congress and the President or the Prime Minister. The poorer third world countries cannot. And so, my friends, that is the situation. I am now going to ask also that my staff could distribute to you the social and economic indicators of my country in showing to you the dynamism and the vitality of our economy. We have changed our economy such that we hope to be able to be self-sufficient. We were importing rice before. The last time we imported rice was in 1976, 77. We paid $500 million for that price. Today, we are exporting rice to our neighboring countries. And the per capita income was about $200. Now, it is more than $800 per capita income. The gross national income has increased 5 times. I need not go any further. I'll wait for the questions, and now I am ready for interrogation.